A U.S. military base lights up the night sky as incoming missiles cut through the darkness, each impact sending shockwaves across a region that has lived on the edge of escalation for decades. Sirens echo, troops scramble, and somewhere far from the blast zone, decisions are being made in quiet rooms under fluorescent lights. Within hours, a familiar answer begins to take shape, sent in the Marines. Not thousands upon thousands, not a full-scale invasion, but a precise number that feels calculated and contained. 2,500 on paper. It sounds controlled, almost cautious. But history has a way of turning limited responses into something far larger, something no one fully intended at the start. What makes this moment different isn't just the attack itself, but the environment it unfolds in. This isn't a blank battlefield or a conventional war zone where lines are clearly drawn. It's a region layered with alliances, rivalries, and long memories. The strike on a U.S. base isn't just an isolated incident, it's part of a wider pattern, a signal in a much larger game. And as those Marines prepare to deploy, the real question begins to surface beneath the surface-level urgency. Not just what they're being sent to do, but what they might trigger simply by arriving. Because this isn't the kind of conflict the United States has historically been most comfortable fighting. There's no clear front line, no singular enemy formation waiting to be engaged. Instead, there's a network, decentralized, adaptive, and deeply embedded across multiple countries. Over the years, Iran hasn't focused on building a traditional military that mirrors Western forces. Instead, it has invested in asymmetry, in strategies designed not to win quickly, but to stretch conflicts out, to complicate them, to turn strength into vulnerability over time. Drones replace jets, proxies replace standing armies, and geography itself becomes a weapon. For the Marines stepping into this environment, the challenge isn't just physical, it's strategic. Their presence alone carries weight. It sends a message of deterrence, of readiness, of escalation if necessary. But it also creates a target. Every base they secure, every position they hold, becomes part of a larger equation the other side has been calculating for years. And unlike past conflicts where overwhelming force could establish quick dominance, this landscape is designed to resist exactly that approach. It absorbs pressure, redistributes it, and responds in ways that don't always look like traditional retaliation. That's where the idea of a trap begins to take shape, not as a conspiracy, but as a pattern. A limited deployment invites limited engagement, which invites measured retaliation, which then invites reinforcement. Step by step, almost logically, the scale begins to grow. It doesn't feel like a sudden leap into war. It feels like a series of reasonable decisions, each one justified by the last. And before long, the original mission, whatever it was, starts to blur, replaced by a broader objective that no one clearly defined at the beginning. There's a familiarity to this progression that's hard to ignore. The United States has navigated similar paths before, entering conflicts with defined goals and controlled expectations, only to find those boundaries shifting over time. What begins as a show of strength can evolve into a prolonged commitment, especially when the opposing strategy is built around endurance rather than decisive victory. And in this case, endurance isn't just a fallback, it's the plan. But this isn't just about military strategy. Running parallel to the movement of troops is another layer entirely, one that often moves faster and hits closer to home. The global economy is tightly interwoven with this region, particularly when it comes to energy. Key shipping routes carry a significant portion of the world's oil supply, and even minor disruptions can ripple outward with surprising speed. A single escalation can shift markets, raise prices, and create a sense of instability that reaches far beyond the immediate conflict zone. For an American audience, that connection is impossible to ignore. What happens thousands of miles away doesn't stay there. It shows up at gas stations, in grocery bills, in the broader sense of economic uncertainty. And in that way, the stakes of this situation extend beyond military objectives or geopolitical influence. They become personal. The deployment of 2,500 Marines isn't just a strategic move. It's part of a chain reaction that can affect daily life in ways that aren't immediately visible, but are deeply felt over time. At the same time, the conflict refuses to stay contained. Other actors begin to move, some openly, others in the shadows. Groups aligned with Iran operate across multiple fronts, each capable of initiating their own form of pressure. What starts as a bilateral tension quickly expands into a regional dynamic, where actions in one area provoke reactions in another. It becomes less about a single confrontation and more about a web of interconnected conflicts, each feeding into the next. And that complexity is what makes the situation so difficult to resolve. There's no single lever to pull, no straightforward path to de-escalation that satisfies all sides. Every move carries consequences, and every pause can be interpreted as weakness. For the Marines on the ground, That means operating in an environment where clarity is limited and the margin for error is narrow. Their mission may be defined in precise terms, but the context surrounding it is anything but simple. As the deployment unfolds, the focus often shifts to capability, what the U.S. military can do, how quickly it can respond, how effectively it can project power. But capability doesn't always translate into control, especially in a conflict shaped by unpredictability. The question isn't whether the United States has the strength to engage, it's whether that strength can achieve a clear and sustainable outcome in a situation designed to resist exactly that. And so the narrative circles back to where it began: a base under attack, a response set in motion, and a group of Marines stepping into a situation that's still evolving. The scale may seem limited, the objectives manageable, but the underlying dynamic suggests something far more complex. This isn't just about the immediate response, it's about what that response sets into motion, both on the ground and far beyond it. In moments like this, the line between action and escalation becomes increasingly difficult to see. Each decision carries weight, not just for the present, but for what it might lead to next. And while the deployment of 2,500 Marines may be framed as a calculated step, it exists within a broader pattern that has, time and again, turned limited engagements into long-term commitments. The uncertainty isn't just about what will happen next week or next month. It's about the trajectory that begins with steps like this, small enough to justify, significant enough to matter. And as history has shown, it's often these early moments, these initial decisions, that shape the course of everything that follows.